Marilyn wore this is from Naked Moon. It's fourth and final book in the North Beach Mystery Series. The main character is Dante Mancuso. Knows. He's a private detective, investigator in North Beach. And this scene right here is trying to get rid of his girlfriend for good reasons, actually, because so that she won't get okay. Marilyn wore a sleeveless blouse that buttoned down the back, a bronze shade that brought out the color of her skin. She looked good, but the blouse wasn't fun. I'm sorry, I can't.
Louder. Yeah, I can't hear you.
More mic. Marilyn wore a sleeveless blouse buttoned down the back, a bronze shade that brought out the color of her skin. She looked good, but the blouse wasn't fun. He had seen before. It reminded him of daily life.
Is the mic on?
A trip to Santa Barbara. They walked past the old prison. They'd been the holding ground for Chinese immigrants once upon a time. This is out at 8 o'clock. The prisoners had scratched their names into the stone. Also the names of their beloved, the towns of origins, homes, obscenities. The dark cubicles were filled with ideograms. A handful of Italians had been incarcerated there as well at the start of World War II for their allegiance to Mussolini, but they hadn't left any record behind. From the steps, Dante could see over to San Francisco on one hand, back to Marin on the other, to those little towns scattered in the dappled light along the underside of those brown hills. I've got a new listing, she said. Another one? A nice place. An earthquake cottage. Marin? She nodded. After the earthquake, 100 years ago, refugees had thrown up shanties on the other side of the bay. Not too big, but there's lots of light. How much money? It's affordable, relatively speaking. Some young couple will jump on it. I thought things were slow. It's a desirable property. They hiked up along the ridge, and Marilyn took out her basket and spread a blanket on the ground. He did not know how to broach what he had to say. He did not know if he wanted to. They talked about nothing. About the eucalyptus trees and how the Park Service was working to eliminate them in favor of the native species, live oak and wild yucca. About the color of the water down there in the shallows, where the last boatload of tourists stood waiting to be hauled back. We're being left behind. Yes. We're on the island alone. It's not so bad. No. Do you want to see it? What? The place in Marin. I'm hosting an open house tomorrow afternoon. What about your clients? They'll be looking at it too. They walked down the rest of the way now, headed for the dock, bumping shoulders where the path narrowed. I have to leave town. The moment was slipping away. He had to edit things some way or the other, because to do otherwise was to put her at risk. She would want an explanation, but he could not tell her why, because the knowledge itself would increase her danger. Go, David Lake. Though that alone, he knew, would not make her safe. Not so long as he himself were alive. Not so long as they could get to him by going after her. They headed across the gangway into the boat. She went down into the hold, put on warmer clothes. He watched her dark form as he pulled the nip sweater over her head. He stepped toward her. My cousin, he said. Not now. She pulled him into an embrace. They lay in the darkness below decks, but the darkness was not yet complete. You could see through the windows the hulking shape of the island, the dark lines of the eucalyptus, and also the white shimmering of the horizon, the edge of the sea and the sky, where the darker masses merged. There was the rocking of the boat and the sound of the sea slapping against the hull, and the slow-mo of the dock as it rolled and creaked with the evening breeze. The wind had picked up at dusk, and then settled after the darkness fell. They talked about his cousin. What do the police think? They're investigating. Gary was involved in some things. He was headed for a bad end. It looks that way. He talked to him a couple of days before he died. She looked uneasy, but he could not say he blamed her. Just weeks before, she'd been down to Cabo with David Lake and the other man. They stayed at a place along the coast, those two. A better choice, Lake. Things might have been different, he told himself, if not for the company, if not for his cousin's foolishness. But this was not altogether true. He had his chance to take her away. They'd had their opportunities. Come with me. He leaned over then and ran his fingers over her face in the darkness of the hold. He could not see the scars, but they were still there. He could feel them mottling along her back and her thighs and her shoulders. My fault. Despite her flirtation with Lake, her growing attachment, she had kept coming to him. But this situation could not go on any longer. Sometimes, in close quarters with her, Johnny could smell the other man's scent. He could smell the big house in Pacific Heights and the inside of the Mercedes and the polo shirts, the seat up in the opera box and the sweat in the guy's sand-colored hair. He could smell the other man as she moved toward him in the dark under the white sheet, as she took his hand and put it down between her legs, as she wrapped herself around him and he buried his head into the hollow of her neck, and she herself started to sweat and labor, head tilted back, eyes toward the ceiling. Then he pulled her closer, wanting just the smell of her body and her perfume and her clothes in those streets they had both known when they were kids. The two of them lying together in his father's house among all the boxes. The boat rocked. The night rushed in. There was the quiet of the island behind them and the sound of the city in the distance. "We could stay here tonight," she said. "The space is tight. I don't want to go back. We have to." She went above deck, looking toward the military prison. The Chinese immigrants there had been beaten and starved by the Irish guards, the Germans, and the Italians. But it was the Tongs that had transported their kinsmen across the sea, getting a keep fee from both sides, the laborers themselves, the employers who wanted them. It was the same business now, more or less. Marilyn stood on the deck with the dark water behind her and the glittering sea in the distance. Glittering city in the distance. She motioned toward the other shore. "It's over there." "What?" "The little house I was telling you about."